You want to check and make sure no one's at the front door? Thank you. Okay, we are live. Here we go live on Facebook. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is Wednesday night and it is Parsha class, and we are live both on Zoom, on YouTube, on Facebook. I'm just going to take a moment to share this on two other social media platforms, and we will get rolling. Tonight we're going to discuss sweat of mitzvah in preparation for Passover and what that means practically. Just give me a moment here to share this. More options, share to a page. Good evening, Carmen. Give people a moment to join. We shared it there. Thank you, ZC. Good evening, Jane. We shared it there. Okay, so we've shared it everywhere. Good evening, John. Okay. So we find ourselves about 10 days before Pesach, before Passover. And I think, like with many Jewish holidays, not I think, I know, that we show up at a holiday and sometimes the holiday comes and goes so quickly, and we're wondering why it didn't provide us with the inspiration that we were hoping it would, a life-altering, life-changing, transformational experience of the holiday. And one of the reasons for that is just human nature, is that if we're not invested in something, if we don't give something our heart and soul, it doesn't necessarily have the long-term effect that we would like it to have. So in Judaism, we actually have a mechanism in the Code of Jewish Law to prep ourselves for that. So the first thing it says in the Code of Jewish Law is that 30 days before Passover, we start studying the laws of Passover. You know when 30 days before Passover is? The morning after Purim. Morning after Purim, we start prepping ourselves with the study, the laws, the insights, the mysticism, the meaning. Then the Shabbos before, let me let Linda in. The Shabbos before Pesach, it's called Shabbat HaGadol, the Great Sabbath. It's the day in which we commemorate the miracle of the firstborn killing each other in Egypt and forgetting about the Jews. And that is another step in the preparation. But there's a psychological / emotional / spiritual preparation that every human being needs to have if they actually would like Pesach to have a long-term internalization effect on themselves. And so that is why even when it comes to prepping our homes for Pesach and cleaning the chametz, removing the leaven from our homes, there's a program. And the program goes as follows. First and foremost, in the weeks and days leading up to Pesach, we're literally supposed to go from room to room in our home, behind the beds, under the cabinets, under the, the halacha is that any place where chametz may potentially enter, you got to search for chametz, right? The Gemara has the famous discussion in the Talmud about shoes off. The Gemara has the discussion about mice. Is it a place that mice can carry chametz to during the year? Is there a potential for finding crumbs there? And if there is, we need to search. And then it's called the night of B'dikas Chametz. When is the night of B'dikas Chametz? The night before Pesach. So this year, Pesach begins April 15th, Friday night at sundown. So the night before Thursday, April 14th, wherever you are, by the way, wherever you're watching, whenever the night of April 14th, 2022 arrives at your locale, you have a Seder, it's called Seder B'dikas Ubir Chametz, the order of searching and eradicating the chametz, the leaven. And the custom is that we put 10 hard pieces of bread. Here's a personal recommendation: wrap it in silver foil, because if you put the chametz without silver foil, then now you're going to have not only the pieces, you can also have crumbs everywhere. It's going to start the process all over. You hide them, you put them in places that hopefully you'll find when you go with your feather and your candle and your spoon, your wooden spoon, and the night of April 14th of the 13th of Adar at night, so going of Nisan, going into the 14th of Nisan, we hide these 10 pieces. Kabbalistically, it's supposed to be 10, and then we go as a family to make a bracha. The bracha is, blessed is the Lord our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us with his commandments and commanded us to eradicate the chametz. And then you go from room to room to room, searching for those 10 pieces, but also searching for any crumbs that you may have not caught with the vacuum in the preparation days for Pesach. And it's not just symbolic, right? Grow up and you think, okay, it's symbolic. Tonight we're going to check for chametz. Daddy is going to go collect 10 pieces, put them in a bag, and we'll burn them tomorrow and call it a day. No, I used to remember watching Chavi's grandfather, Professor Block. He used to spend hours with his feather and his candle going under the bed and every inch of the house just to search to find any potential crumbs. You have to look in any cracks and any hidden places. You look in the couch, in between the couch cushions. You shouldn't have any discussions in between when you make the bracha, when you start searching for the chametz, unless it's about the search of the chametz, because you want to be fully focused on the search for chametz. So you make the blessing, you go to the room closest to which you are when you make the blessing, maybe it's in the room where you are itself, and then you go from room to room until you find all 10 of them, you put them together in a place where mice and babies and children and toddlers won't get their hands on it between the night and tomorrow morning. Right? It's the greatest dilemma that and don't think it hasn't happened. It's happened many times where you search for the chametz the night before, you hide it, you put the bag with the chametz and on top of the kitchen windowsill. In the morning you wake up and it's gone. Why? Because the kid woke up in the morning, he saw something odd on the windowsill, got busy, or a mouse came, or if you're in New York, a rat came, and the next thing you knew, it was gone. So if you have a pet, you need to be extremely careful to make sure. Why are you smiling? You're going to get a pet? Oh, maybe you'll get a pet. So you make sure if you have a pet that the pet does not get a hold of the chametz, put in a place where they can't get hold of it. Then you make an announcement. And the announcement is a statement. It's in Aramaic. Kol chamira v'chamia de'ikar b'shusi, de'lo chamiseu de'lo viarte, de'lo yadainale libotil v'lehevi hefker kafir ara, all leaven or anything leavened which is in my possession, which I have neither seen nor removed, and about which I am unaware. What happens if you search, and it turns out many is better than all of us, and he hit something from the shalach manas, some candy that's pure chametz under a mattress somewhere, that somehow you missed it. So you make a proclamation that all leaven or anything leavened which is in my possession, which I have neither seen nor removed, and about which I am unaware, shall be considered naught and ownerless as dust of the earth. That's what you do at night after you check for the chametz and you put away those 10 pieces. Then comes the next day, which this year again is Friday, April 15th. In Bozeman, you have to do it before 12:06 p.m. So around noon time, every locale, you have to look at your calendar. But in Bozeman, it's around 12:06. So by 11:45, give yourself 20 minutes. You take all the leftover chametz that you have that has not been thrown out before Pesach, and you put it into a can, some kind of aluminum can, either a pan or a garbage can, and you burn it. And then what do you say when you burn it? You say slightly different than you said the night before. You say all leaven or anything leaven which is in my possession, whether I've seen it or not, whether I've observed it or not, whether I've removed it or not, shall be considered naught and ownerless as the dust of the earth. So we're going through this entire process, which sounds nuts. So what if you have a crumb in your house? Isn't Pesach? You sit around, you have a seder, you eat charosas, right? That's one of your favorite, the charosa. See, I remember. And you sit around and you celebrate. What is it, this obsession with getting rid of the chametz? Well, first of all, from a practical level, the Torah says you're not allowed to have any leaven. So if you're not allowed to have any leaven, it means any leaven, period. Secondly, the Arizal, the Holy Ari, says that anyone that is extra careful, scrupulent, in the observance of not having chametz on Pesach will merit that they won't sin all year. That's quite a promise, quite a pledge, right? If you're extra careful on Pesach, then you won't sin all year. And it's interesting that when do we do this burning of the chametz? We do it on the 14th day of Nisan, Erev Pesach, the eve of Pesach on the 14th. 14 is 2 times 7. which represents the 7 attributes of the godly soul, the 7 attributes of the animalistic soul that each of us has inside of us. And we have to take a candle and we have to search through our own 14. We have to search through in the inner sparks, in the inner crevices of our soul to make sure that there's no remnants of arrogance and of haughtiness and of pride and any inappropriate types of attributes. We cleanse ourselves. So that's the interesting part, is that so often we get caught up just in the practical of cleaning the homes for chametz. We forget that the biggest part of the process after you clean your whole home for chametz is to clean your inner self from chametz. Remember, chametz is dough that rises. Leaven is when the dough rises. That's why we bake matzah in 18 minutes or less, because the dough has no time to rise. And then it ends up looking like a matzah. So whether it's the Sephardic type of matzah, which is more like a lafa, or it's more like the Ashkenazic, which is the majority of Jews that eat the matzah like the Ashkenazim, which is like a big round cracker, zugesund. Either way, matzah doesn't rise, chametz does. Chametz represents arrogance, represents haughtiness, gaiva. My way or the highway. I'm right, you're wrong. I'm always right, you're always wrong. Comes Pesach and says, whoa, what's up?
They were there, they're gone now.
Huh?
There were some people going by, but they're gone now.
Think it's a security threat?
Nope.
Okay. Then I'll go back to giving the class. And so when we cleanse ourselves for Pesach, it's not just about cleaning our home for chametz, it's about cleaning our inner recesses of our heart and our soul of the chametz. By the way, one of the most beautiful prayers that we say when we burn the chametz, right? It's Erev Pesach. I remember the year of COVID in 2020, I was alone, standing alone with my brother-in-law Schneier in the front yard. It was a little odd because normally some people from the community join us. But there's something really special about that prayer that we say when we burn the chametz. Here's the prayer. By the way, it's in your siddur on page 406. If you want to see it inside, at the bottom of 406 in this siddur, the Tehillas Hashem siddur. Oh, 406, right? Isn't today the 406 day? I think today is.
Oh, yeah.
It's 406 day, and the prayer that I'm about to read is on page 406. Go Montana. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, then something's off. You didn't learn well in Hebrew school. So at the bottom of the page, this is the prayer. May it be your will, Lord our God and God of our fathers, that just as I remove the chametz from my house and from my possession, so shall you remove all the extraneous forces, purge the spirit of impurity from the earth, eradicate our evil inclination from within us, and grant us a heart of flesh to serve you in truth. And all the sitra achra and all the klipot, which are the opposing forces that go against our spirituality, and all the wickedness destroy in smoke, like we're burning in the fire. So the smoke should represent the burning of the evil inclination and the spirits of folly and impurity, and abolish the rule of evil from the earth. And all those, it's an incredible line that every year I smile when I say it. In Hebrew, it's v'cholam me'ikim l'shchina, and all those who distress the shchina. Anyone that distresses the divine presence, remove the spirit of destruction and of judgment, just as you annihilated Egypt and its idols in those days. At this time, Amen Selah. Right? So we're not just looking to eradicate the chametz from our homes. We're looking to eradicate the representation of chametz from our souls, from our hearts, from our world, from our communities, and from the general public. We want to live in a world that's pure and holy and good. We are naturally inclined to despise and be disgusted by human atrocity. When we see human beings mistreat other human beings, if we're in a sane and healthy state of mind, we can't stand it. We don't want to watch it. We don't want to see it because it's so hard to digest that humans are capable of being so bad. And right before Pesach, we say to Hashem, yes, eradicate the evil that exists within me, but not just within me. Eradicate the evil that exists in our world and those that distress the Shekhinah, right? Those that mess with God and make God uncomfortable. What does that mean? It means that there are entities in the world that are they're so opposite of godliness that it makes God's presence feel uncomfortable. And so we ask God that as we burn the chametz, those forces of evil should be eradicated and burned as well. With that in mind, as I was preparing for class today, I said, there's no one I ever met that doesn't like a good story. So I remembered that when I was in yeshiva, which must have been 100 years ago, I read a story, and we spent the whole night farbrenging about it. I was maybe 18 years old, and we spent the entire night farbrenging, discussing, inspiring each other, and analyzing this story that I'm about to share with you today. And I'm not going to wing it. I actually brought the Likutei Diburim, the new edition of Likutei Diburim, which are the talks of the previous Chabad Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak. This particular talk he shared on Pesach, on the holiday of Passover, in 1934. So Pesach 1934, let me just see where the Frierdiker Rebbe, when he shared this story, let me just pick a peek here. He wasn't in America yet. I'm guessing he was in either in Latvia or Poland. He was already ousted from Russia, so he wasn't there. I'm guessing it was Latvia or Poland. It was in Eastern Europe. And it's Pesach, and he's sharing the following story. And I'm literally going to read verbatim, but I'm going to translate from the Yiddish straight to the English. There was a chassid whose name was Reb Zalman Sherbiner. Sherbiner, he was from Sherbin, which was a village. And in the fields of Sherbin, they used to cut the wheat for shmura matzah, right? There was a certain program. That's where they would go to cut the wheat in order to make the handmade shmura matzah. And they would pick the best field, with the best wheat, with the most luscious, not luscious, but the most fruitful wheat, and they would pick the particular day that they were going to cut the wheat. And there was two conditions. The conditions were that the day that they were going to cut the wheat, right, the day they cut the wheat, it had to be a sunny, clear day where the sun was shining in all its glory, and that for 3 days prior, there was no rain. And what time of the day did they start the cutting process so that the wheat should be absolutely dry? Why do you need it to be absolutely dry? Because no water should get in there and eventually turn it into something potentially leavened. You want to make sure it's absolutely dry and unleavened. So they would do it from 12 noon till 2 or 3 in the afternoon. When it came approximately the time of the year that they would go cut the wheat, Reb Zalman himself, the farmer, would come to Lubavitch, to the town of Lubavitch, to start organizing the plan. So he would come. No one knew exactly when they were going to go cut the wheat. They knew what the criteria was. So he would come for a few weeks. He would pick out the right guys that are going to come with him to Sherbin, so they should be ready to roll. And even though the majority of the work was done by him and his family and the people locals in Sherbin, he brought a couple of guys from Lubavitch along so they can help him in the process in this incredible mitzvah of cutting the wheat. Sometimes it would be a week, sometimes 10 days. To wait for that particular day when it's sunny and clear and hot, and 3 days of no rain. It was the mitzvah of cutting the wheat for the matzah was with great, great joy. A double and triple joy, especially when they were preparing the wheat for the matzah that the Rebbe himself, at that time it was the previous Chabad Rebbe's father, Rav Shalom Dober, the 5th Rebbe, for his matzah. So they would hang out together for a few days in Sherbin. There was a big group of Hasidim spending time together. And when the right day came with this great enthusiasm, they would go out to the field. They would wear their hats and their gartels and their black coats, even though the sun was baking, because it was such a mitzvah. They wanted to be dressed with honor. The women and children would stand in the field and watch, with also dressed in Shabbos clothing, for this great, great moment just to cut the wheat for Shmura Matzah. And they stood and they sweat and they sweat. And when they were done their full day, they would go back into the homes. They would shower or bathe, change back into their Shabbos clothing. And go daven mincha, the afternoon prayer. They wouldn't say the tachlim prayer. They wouldn't say the supplication prayer because it was such a yontiv, it was such a special time. And they would daven mincha, they would daven the amida of that day with a simchas Torah nigun. They would use a tune of simchas Torah. That's how much joy there was. And when it came to the end of the Aleinu, by the Kaddish, by the last Osa Shalom, where they go 3 steps back, so they would flip the chazan 3 times. It was a whole program of simcha, like you do in shul on Simchas Torah. They would dance and sing, and then they'd come back to Lubavitch, and the Rebbe Rashab, Reb Shalom Dober, would say special Hasidic discourse for them and talk to them about the power of what they just accomplished by investing so much toil in the beauty of a mitzvah. And I want to pause here for a moment before I get to the part of the story that I wanted to share. This was just an intro, and that is to appreciate the toil of a mitzvah. We always like to get the job done. What about the toil that gets you there? The shveis, the sweat, the blood, the energy, the koiches, the investment we put in order to experience a mitzvah, that not only adds value and some heavenly reward, it actually allows us to appreciate the experience and also refines us. The process itself is a refining process for the individual that's prepping themselves for the mitzvah. And that's where we get to the next point. That is, Reb Zalman Zerbiner passed away in 1894. So in 1894, he passes away. So they started getting their wheat from this place, from that place. A lot of it came from the Khersonia gubernia. You know, Kherson in southern Ukraine, everyone you hear in the news, Kherson, Kherson, Kherson. That area was very good for the growth of wheat. And there was a rabbi there, Reb Nachman Dolitsky, and together with Reb Tzvi Salmon, they would sit, and the wheat would come from there. In 1897 was when the Chabad Yeshiva was formally founded by Reb Shalom Dover. So he passed away in 1920. In the final 23 years of his life, he founded the central Chabad Yeshiva called Tomchei Tmimim, which exists till this very day, which included a yeshiva that was focused not only on Torah study, but on character refinement and on the study both of Jewish mysticism and Jewish practicality. So he makes a yeshiva, and the way it worked is that all the work that they did with the water mill to grind the wheat and prepare the flour, and the night before, they'd collect, it's called Mayim Shalonu, they would take the water, put it in jars, and overnight leave it in cold places so that there shouldn't be any warmth to the water in case there's some warmth that would allow for the dough, for the flour to rise. So you wanted it to be freezing cold water without any chance of it rising. Right? When you bake challah, sometimes you use warm water because it helps it rise quicker. They want, till today, by the way, there's something called Mayim Shalonu. They take these glass jars and they collect the water the night before and they keep it like in a basement so the water stays cold. This was all done by the yeshiva students starting Rosh Chodesh Adar 6 weeks before Pesach. They would start the entire process with a lot of toil and effort from these yeshiva students. On a side note, when new yeshiva students would join the yeshiva, if you had a kid, and you said, I heard there's this great yeshiva in Lubavitch, and later the yeshiva moved from Lubavitch to Rostov, and etc., and eventually to Atvatsk in Poland, and to Shanghai, and eventually to America. But the yeshiva, the criteria was that anyone that was to be accepted in the yeshiva, the Frierdiker, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, who was the principal of the school, the administrator, would bring a list to his father, Reb Shalom Dover, the founder, and he would go over the list and see if these students are a good fit for the yeshiva. So one day, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak brings a name to his father and says, this student applied for the yeshiva. So the Reb Shalom Dover had his private team of rabbis in the yeshiva that would give him a report on what they think the student's talents are, what his pluses are, his pros, the cons, where he needs work. This student, this was the report. He's brilliant. He's talented. But you could see on his face, he's very, very unrefined. He had a gasas, a grubkeit, a coarseness to him that needed some refining. Right? We all know people that could be brilliant, could be wonderful people, great friends, great relatives, but they're coarse, they're grub. They use language that's grub. They style, the way they talk is grub. They give you the aura of not being very refined. And then we meet people that are so refined, delicate, edel, So this particular student, this was the report. And so when the Rebbe Rashab heard that, he said, when it comes time to prep for Pesach, I want you to give this kid a run for his money. So without the kid knowing, Rosh Chodesh Adar, when they started the prep work for the matzah, the Frierdiker Rebbe, the previous Rebbe Yosef Yitzchak, every hard job that there was for the students to do in the grinding of the wheat and the cutting of the wheat and the preparing of the dough and the baking of the matzah and the packing of the matzah and working in the watermill and working with the stones to grind, any hard job, this yeshiva student got. That was his operation. And it came time to bake the matzah. So there was the first batch of matzah they baked for everyone. Then there was Erev Pesach, the actual eve of Passover, the night before. They were baking for, the morning of Erev Pesach, Erev Yom Tov in the morning, they were baking the matzah. He was in charge of doing all the hard work. And the night before, they kept him up till 3 a.m. He was in charge of cleaning the offices of the yeshiva from all chametz. The guy practically didn't have a moment to sleep or rest. For 6 weeks straight, he was in yeshiva. Every minute he had off from learning, he was busy working, toiling, working his tail off to prepare for Pesach till the Seder night itself. And right before the Seder starts, the previous Rebbe tells him, tomorrow morning, after the Seder, first morning of Yom Tov, we're going to meet up. We're going to study together a Hasidic discourse on the words. There's a mimer called Sheishas Yom, in the 6 days of Passover. It's a discourse of the Alter Rebbe. We're going to learn at the morning of Yom Tov, right? First thing in the morning. The guy's beaten. He's beaten. He hasn't slept. He hasn't had eaten properly. He's white. He's exhausted. And finally, he's working till the minute Yom Tov starts. Then he sits at a Seder, finishes the Seder at 3 a.m. And at 5:36 in the morning, the previous Rebbe wants to see him sitting and learn. We're going to learn together the discourse. I knew, the Frierdiker Rebbe says, he says himself, I knew that this student, right, he's saying this in 1934 about something that happened in 1897 or so. I knew that this student was not only going to be at the Seder, he was actually, part of his job was to be in charge of a particular section of the room, which means he'd have to clean up. It was going to be a very long night for him. But he came in the morning because that's what they did. He says, in Untitled Chapter, they never asked for vos. They never asked why. You were told to do something, you did it like a soldier. The minute you ask why, so parents have to answer their children when they ask why, sometimes more than they'd like. But in Untitled Chapter, they were treated like Marines. You're going to be the Marines of Judaism. You're going to be at the forefront of the fight against assimilation and enlightenment and to bring Jews home to their Father in heaven. You're going to be an operator. To be an operator, there's no time now for the whys. You can ask questions in learning, no opposition to that. But when you're told to do something in the spirit of the law of Yiddishkeit, there's no asking. That's why Tzivas Hashem, as Erica says, right, Hashem's army. You want someone to grow to be a tree that produces fruit and creates more inspiration and more light with lots of leaves and lots of fruit. You got to put in the investment. It takes time. And here's the punchline. Achron Shel Pesach, on the last day of Passover, by the meal with the yeshiva students in the big auditorium, the Rebbe Rashab Shalom Dover told his son, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, he said his quote in Yiddish, Yosef Yitzchak, guck sich zu, was shel mitzvah mar. Take a look at what the sweat of a mitzvah can accomplish. Weisendig unbemerkter Eid of the Talmud and Al. The Reb Shalom Dober pointed to that student without that student realizing that he was being pointed to. But he shows his son, Rabbi Yosef, he says, you see the student? Look at the change on his face. He has a new face. As I rub the grubkeit, the coarseness has been removed. And it's like pnei adam. Now you see the image of a human. He didn't look so human before. Now he looks human. And obviously, we're not talking about physically. We're talking about the aura, the spirit of the student. Why? Because when you sweat for a mitzvah, it has a practical, physical change on us. It makes us a more refined. Right? What's the difference between refined individuals and unrefined individuals? The answer is work. to work on ourselves to be more refined, to train ourselves, to spiritualize ourselves to be more refined. It doesn't happen miraculously. No one ever became refined because someone stood with a baseball bat and said, be more refined. It takes work. It takes recognition that I'm not refined. It takes work. It takes an opportunity to not just pray and not just do a mitzvah, but to invest in a mitzvah. So pick your mitzvah. Maybe it's cleaning for Pesach in the next week. Maybe you weren't planning on it. Let's be honest. You don't have to tell me. Well, maybe you weren't planning on really cleaning for Pesach. You were happy enough to get some matzah. You're going to have a brisket, ki yadua, as it's known in America. God told Moses when the Jews came out of Egypt, you have to have matzah and a brisket. You don't remember that verse in Exodus where it says you should have? Of course, because there is none. You know what it does say? You're not allowed to have leaven in your home. You can absolutely have Pesach, vegetarian or chicken or turkey. Do not have to have brisket. Not one commandment. But you could have brisket. You can even have good brisket. You can even have kosher brisket. If you live in Bozeman and you want a kosher brisket, just ask. We'll sell you one. That's not the mitzvah. The mitzvah is to show up at the Seder and say, wow, I invested heart and soul. I gave Pesach a chance. I didn't just wake up on Friday, April 15th and said, ooh, tonight's the Seder, yippee-ki-yo. You know, that's not how it works. If we prep ourselves, pick a room in your house where you know that's where the most of the potato chips and snacks you have when you watch television, when you watch football, you'll see it, is in front of that room. Make that your project this week. Crumb by crumb by crumb, and every crumb that you remove from your home is also a representation of the crumbs that you're removing from within yourselves, making yourselves, ourselves, a vessel for godliness, a vessel for purification, a vessel for refinement, so that when we sit at the Seder and we go, die, no, right? We're not just singing a song because that's what Bubby used to sing. We're singing Dayenu, like, wow, how much good has God done for us? To appreciate God's goodness and kindness, we need to be refined. To appreciate the 4 questions of Manashtana, we need to be refined. To appreciate all the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim and to not want to curse your religion when you're eating the maror, the bitter herb, and ask, what in the world are we doing? If you want to appreciate why you're doing it, you got to live with Pesach, not just on the night and not just during the 8 days of Yom Tov, but in preparation for. And that's why I chose, even though Pesach's not for another 9 days, 10 days, I chose to speak not about Parshas Mitzorah this week, which is the beautiful Torah portion, to talk about Pesach, simply so that we understand that the prep work that we invest in Pesach has an effect on how we celebrate the Yom Tov. And it applies to Pesach and it applies to the rest of the year too. Anything we invest in, what's that line on the can? No deposit, no return. Don't expect a return. You know why I didn't make any money in Bitcoin? Because I never invested in Bitcoin. It's a simple process. You know why you don't feel refined? You don't feel like a mitzvah speaks to you? Because you never invested in the mitzvah. You showed up like a shlomazel 3 seconds before Pesach and said, ooh, man, ishtana. Yeah, beautiful. What's the investment? So we have a week. We have more than a week. Prep yourself. And you will see, this is not a prophecy. It's simple mathematics. You will see that if you put the investment in them on Friday night, Yud Daled Nisan Orel Tezvav on April 15th shows up and you're sitting at a Seder, whether it's in Boise or in Bozeman or unfortunately in Cedar City, wherever you may be, or Belfray, or in Los Angeles, if you don't do tshuva and you don't come home, Margot, come home to Bozeman beforehand, wherever you may be, in Norway, wherever you're going to be, you will see practically that the prep work that you put into Pesach is resulting in a more refined experience that benefits you, not only during Pesach, but in the long term, and really gives you the gift of Yom Tov. Yom Tov is a gift, but you're not going to see it as a gift. You'll see it as a burden if you don't put the effort into it. And so that is the message tonight. Zeya shel mitzvah, sweat of a mitzvah. When's the last time you sweat doing a mitzvah for God? And if you didn't, start schwitzing. Make believe I'm your trainer, your personal trainer. And the trainer tells you, keep doing, lift, you can do it, lift, you can do it, till you're schwitzing buckets. And then you know that it's actually making some changes in your muscles, in your weight loss, in your what's the other one? In your calorie loss, whatever people are worried about, right? So I'm going to be your spiritual trainer today. And when you start schwitzing under the couch, trying to find that piece of chametz that your dog, that bear dropped under the couch, then you'll know that, I'm giving the investment, and therefore there is a deposit, so there will be a return until the ultimate return, when we all return to the Holy Land of Eretz Yisrael, the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu. It'd be speeding in our days. Amen. Amen. Don't sit by idly. You got a week to do it. Rock and roll. See you back here soon. Sei gesund. Just going to stop the recording. If I know how.